Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the story about Naruto. What if Naruto become a master of Genjutsu? Part 1, 9K special. Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please do support for more awesome content and also hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends and also support the creator of this fanfic. I have created many playlists, check it out in the channel. So let's start the video. The meeting. Naruto Uzumaki was standing on the bridge that Team 7 used as their meeting place next to his teammates Sakura Haruno and Sasuke Uchiha. Their Nin-sensei, Kakashi Haddock, had left them just after they completed their teamwork exercises. Naruto watched Sakura approach Sasuke. Her hands were clasped together and she put on her best bashful smile. "Sasuke, do you want to go on a date with me?" "No," Sasuke said before walking away. Naruto's eyes narrowed. He never understood why Sasuke would turn down the beautiful Sakura's invitation for a date. Didn't he know how lucky he was? Nevertheless, he approached Sakura with a wide grin on his face. "Sakura, wanna go?" Naruto began, only to feel pain blossom from the crown of his head. "No, you moron," she replied, retracting her fist. "I will never go on a date with you, so stop bothering me." Sakura turned around and walked away from him, leaving him all alone yet again. Naruto's grin faded as he shook his head and ignored the pain. He looked up to the sky, crestfallen. Maybe he shouldn't bother her anymore, maybe then she'd be nicer. No, what was he thinking? If he managed to show Sakura how much cooler and better he was than Sasuke, then she'd have to go on a date with him and be his friend. He raised a fist to the air. Nothing could stop him now. His arm dropped to his side and sighed. There was no way he could show up Sasuke if Kakashi didn't teach him any new jutsu. Kakashi was way too focused on doing teamwork exercises, and the only way he'd move on was if he was satisfied with their teamwork. He didn't want to push him, as he knew Kakashi took the idea of teamwork very seriously, but it had been a month since they became Team 7, and they'd only made a little bit of progress. "Guess I'll just have to train by myself, just like always." Naruto could ignore many of the bad things that happened to him, but he was tired of being alone. He was always alone, always had been. At least Sasuke and Sakura spoke to him, but the only reason why they did was because they had to, not because they wanted to. Trying over and over again to earn their trust and respect and being met with failure and scorn was really starting to get to him, but he couldn't give up. He began to walk into the forest, heading to a clearing he had used for training for over a month. If he couldn't gain their respect with his words, then maybe he'd try winning them over with his actions instead. Unknown to Naruto, Kakashi had been watching his genin, and he left them behind. He'd grown used to his team's inability to work together, but the pang of disappointment he felt was just as fresh as it always was. Naruto stood in front of the memorial stone and imagined, like he did many times before, what his parents might be like. He hoped they had been awesome shinobi who saved princes and princesses and were treated like heroes. He imagined his father standing tall and handsome, holding a special kunai in each of his hands, ready to enter the battlefield. His mother stood beside him, her mouth spread into a grin much like his own, her signature katana out and ready to drink the blood from her enemy's wounds. He smiled proudly, though it was a bittersweet smile, as well since he still didn't know who his parents were. Shaking himself out of his daydream, he ran off to his new training spot, which wasn't too far away from the memorial stone. He made sure nobody was nearby because the last time he trained, he'd been interrupted and had to go somewhere else. The clearing he frequently visited was secluded and would give him the privacy he needed. After making sure that he hadn't been followed, he put his hands in the cross seal for his favorite technique, the shadow clone jutsu. Once he formed the clone, it began to fight him. Naruto made sure to tap the clone with light hits. He'd learned pretty quickly that a single strong strike would make his clone disappear, so he consciously lowered the force behind his attacks to prevent that from happening. The first clone continued fighting him for nearly half an hour before it became a cloud of smoke. When it did, he formed another clone, repeating the process. Naruto continued to fight like this until he had beaten 2 more clones. Each clone lasted for a shorter amount of time than the last, as Naruto became less conscious of the power he was putting into his attacks. Naruto collapsed once he was done, his chest heaving in and out. Fighting for more than an hour was really tiring. "Damn it," he yelled. A few birds flew from the trees as they heard his scream, but many just ruffled their feathers and looked down at him as if they were trying to understand why he was making such a noise. Naruto inhaled and exhaled deeply while his muscles relaxed. "This sucks. I can't train anything other than Genjutsu, and I don't feel like I'm improving at all." The birds that remained in the trees squawked at him. "There has to be some way I can get stronger." Since he didn't have any other workouts he could do, Naruto stood up and began to walk to the waterfall to clean off the sweat and grime that had stuck on his body. The cool thing about the waterfall was that it was always warm. He had followed the river that led into the waterfall back to its source. The natural hot springs that gushed from the mountains around the village hidden in the leaves. He preferred cleaning here instead of taking a freezing cold shower in his own apartment. The water heater never seemed to be working, and Naruto never understood why. The best part of it was that unlike the public training grounds, the waterfall was private. Naruto was sure that nobody knew about the waterfall's location except for him, since he'd never seen anyone use this waterfall before. He had camped out there for 2 weeks during one summer vacation, an experience he thoroughly enjoyed. He did return to the village every few days for supplies, but other than that, he basically lived in the forest. He didn't know it at the time, but his new training clearing was pretty close to the waterfall, a surprise he welcomed with gusto. Since he was still wary of someone following him to his secret abode, he used the skills he learned from his pranking days, move silently, but quickly, to make sure he wasn't followed, taking a different path to reach his secret waterfall. He was at the edge of the forest next to the waterfall, but he froze in mid-step when he heard the sound of rustling leaves. A woman appeared on the banks of the small lake the waterfall emptied into. Naruto was able to regain his focus and slowly put his foot back down, quickly crouching behind a tree. Normally, he would let his instincts take control of him when faced with a new situation, but he was incredibly curious and ignored his mind screaming at him to run. Naruto continued to hide behind the tree, peering out from behind to watch what the woman was doing. Despite the fact that her back was facing him, Naruto could tell that this woman exuded a confidence and grace that few other women possessed. Her black hair was both messy and properly maintained, almost as if she willed it to follow her demands. He followed the hair down to the small of her back. Underneath it he could see white bandages with a pattern of what appeared to be rose thorns embroidered on it, but, as he couldn't see any bloodstains, he came to the conclusion that the woman was using those bandages as clothing. Naruto's eyes continued to trail down the woman's body, finding that the bandages ended just under her posterior. Naruto was surprised to feel his body heat up after seeing how well the bandages covered the woman's shapely backside. His eyes continued their downward journey to see some of the most toned legs he had ever laid witness to, muscles rippling as she adjusted her footing. He could see that she was someone who trained extensively to maintain those legs. His eyes snapped up when he saw the woman look around. He wasn't able to see any part of her face, so he had no idea who the woman could be. He did notice that her right arm was covered in a red sleeve, and both her hands and forearms were wrapped in tape. He really should have gone, but that same feeling returned. He had to know who this lady was. Naruto saw the woman reach up and untie something where her forehead would be. His eyes widened when he saw that she had untied a forehead protector from her head and dropped it on a nearby rock. Many gears were whirring in his head as he continued to examine the kunoichi, his fear and that nagging sense of compulsion rooting him to the spot. He knew immediately that she wasn't a rookie, but he couldn't help but shake the feeling this woman wasn't a chunin, but a chunin of the highest caliber. For some reason, when he thought of chunin, he saw the kunoichi's dress as if he had seen her before. His thoughts ground to a halt when he saw her unwind the bandages that were her dress. He was completely entranced by the kunoichi as she slowly exposed her skin to the outside world, inch by tantalizing inch. His eyes darted around quickly as she laid the clothing on the rock before locking onto her rear when he saw that she had bandages covering her private area along with her chest. She reached down and pulled her mesh shirt off along with the sleeve, which left her back completely bare, besides her bindings, and Naruto saw her muscles expand and contract as she did so. She left no area of her body unattended. Naruto's heartbeat increased significantly as the kunoichi continued to move around. Naruto felt his cheeks heat up and his brain pulse, and he didn't know why. He looked down, tearing his eyes away from the woman for just a moment, only to see a bulge in his pants. He heard something similar happen to some of the people who lived in his area. They called it an erection, if he remembered correctly. He shook his head and turned his attention back to the woman, shoving the strange experience to the side. When he did look back at the kunoichi and saw her slowly remove her chest bindings, he felt his heartbeat quicken even more. After removing her bindings, the kunoichi placed them where the rest of her clothing lay and reached down. Naruto, guessing what was going to happen, tried his hardest to move, but he failed to do so, hypnotized by the sight of the kunoichi's creamy skin. He watched as, wrap after wrap, the kunoichi's bindings were removed. When she had finished, Naruto was presented with a scene many men would die for. Her naked ass was in full view as she bent over to pick up her forehead protector. His body was going into overdrive as his better-than-normal eyesight seemed to hone in on something he had only seen when looking at the results of his sexy jutsu. The sight was immediately engraved in his memory. His nose felt like it was about to gush out a large stream of blood. When he saw the kunoichi's breasts from between her legs, he felt his eyes roll into the back of his head. When Naruto came to, he was sprawled near the tree he was hiding behind. Naruto stood up, only to witness that same kunoichi from before, her hair damp and glistening in the sun. Unlike before, she was fully clothed. He didn't move, but he did feel his previous state of arousal return with a vengeance. He looked down and frowned at his erect banana. What the hell is going on? He didn't even know why he had fallen unconscious or why his nose was bleeding. He only saw that sort of thing happen when the old Hokage read his adult books or when a pervert was hit with the sexy jutsu. His eyes widened as he took that in. I am not a pervert. He raised his fist into the air, showing his enthusiasm to the world. Unfortunately for Naruto, the kunoichi heard him. Come out of there right now, she said. Naruto's body moved on its own again as he leaped out of the bushes and stood in front of the kunoichi, not catching the fleeting look of shock present on her face. Naruto stared at her before he shrank from the kunoichi's anger. Hands on her hips, the kunoichi struck an imposing figure as she glared at Naruto. Her ruby red eyes added to the effect, and the concentric black rings contained within their pupils made her glare even more menacing. But Naruto was used to people glaring at him, and he wouldn't back down this time, even though he knew that no one would know about this if he did. Both Naruto and the kunoichi continued their staring contest for nearly a minute, neither one of them giving an inch. Why are you here? She asked, finally breaking the silence. When he took in the kunoichi's righteous anger, combined with the cold glare and his own guilt over the situation, he begged for mercy immediately. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take a peek at you when you were undressing, but I just always clean here, and I didn't want to walk back home, and I'm really sorry. The kunoichi examined him and pondered his words. And to Naruto's surprise, her eyes softened and the ends of her luscious, lipstick-covered lips turned upwards into a small smile. Hopefully, she realized he wasn't a pervert trying to watch her undress, that was definitely an accident. He didn't regret what he saw, though, but he was willing to accept the consequences of his actions. Her eyes suddenly widened. Don't be afraid, alright? Naruto looked at her, trembling in his sandals, but his sense of fear subsided somewhat after hearing kunoichi's gentle words. He took in the floral scent of the forest, which must have come from the woman behind him. It smelled like a mixture of roses and lavender, which was something he was almost sure wouldn't mix, but somehow managed to meld together almost perfectly, making him shiver in delight. He took in the scent some more before he heard the kunoichi's voice cleanly cut through his plans. Would you mind coming closer? We need to talk. Naruto felt a shiver crawl down his spine as he saw the kunoichi staring at him. He walked over to a softer part of the ground and sat down as quickly as he could. Alright, but who are you? How did you find this place? I thought I was the only one who knew this waterfall was here. Though he knew she didn't mean him any harm by now, he shuddered when he thought about what women did to perverts, Sakura being the prime example. The woman moved closer to him, sitting on her knees so that they were facing each other. I guess it isn't surprising that you don't remember me, but I think that you've seen me before. Naruto's eyes squinted before he pointed a seemingly accusatory finger at her, finally remembering who the kunoichi was. You're Kiba-sensei, aren't you? The kunoichi smiled slightly. That I am. My name is Kurenai. And you must be Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto nodded fervently. To answer your question, I stumbled across it a few days ago, and I took the opportunity to start showering here. It was a good thing I did find it, since I have problems with my own shower. Naruto nodded in agreement. I know what you mean. My shower is always cold. This place is perfect for taking a shower, isn't it? Kurenai chuckled slightly, shaking her hair. Somehow, there wasn't a single strand out of place. That it is, she said. That brings me to what you were trying to do, she added, all mirth erased from her voice. Naruto's gaze darkened. While I understand that you didn't expect to find me here, the fact that I'm sorry. Please, Kurenai raised her hand in a placating gesture. I know you're sorry. She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. Do you admit you watched me undress? Naruto was about to defend himself yet again, but Kurenai's next words stopped him in his tracks, even if it was unintentional. Naruto nodded this time. Do you know that it is a crime to peek at people while they are taking baths? Naruto shook his head. No, it isn't. Maybe it's a crime against public decency, but it's not an actual crime. And besides, wouldn't it be your fault if you got caught naked in public? Kurenai sighed and ran a hand through her hair. Good point, though this type of harassment should be a crime. In any case, since you weren't trying to peek at me deliberately, Naruto smiled sheepishly. And you accepted responsibility for your actions, I will not tell anyone about this. The last thing I need is for word to spread around about what just happened. Thank you, Naruto said. It was nothing. In fact, it was my fault for not noticing you in the first place. The fact that you could hide yourself from me for so long was very impressive. Naruto grabbed his pants and balled his fists around the fabric. He lowered his head in genuine surprise and shame. Why are you being so nice to me? You know who I am. Nearly everyone hates me, and the ones who don't hate me don't care about me at all. I don't see what the villagers see. All I see is someone in need of a friend, and if you don't mind, I'd like to be that friend. Naruto's grip on his pants tightened. He tilted his head upwards, facing Kurenai once again. Unlike all the others, Kurenai gave him a chance to explain himself. She didn't dismiss him and wasn't rude without good reason. She was the one who wanted to be friends with him. I'd like that a lot. She smiled. Then it looks like we're friends. Naruto raised his hands in the air. Yes. Thank you, Kurenai-sensei. He blushed in embarrassment. Why did he have to be so lame? Kurenai couldn't help herself and laughed softly. Naruto was about to sulk, but when he saw Kurenai's smile, a smile of his own slowly began to break across his face. For only the second time in his life, someone was willing to accept him, and it made him so happy. Just one more thing, she said suddenly. Naruto cocked his head to the side in confusion. If I take a shower here, please do not peek at me. Naruto nodded his head emphatically. Good. Since it's getting so late, I have to get home. Maybe we can meet again sometime. As she got up and turned to leave, Naruto stood up as well. Kurenai-sensei, please let me walk you home. Kurenai turned back, eyebrows raised. That's very kind of you, but you don't have to worry about me. It's no problem. All he wanted was to repay Kurenai for her kindness any way he could. Besides, a gentleman should always walk a lady home, right? Especially since we just became friends. She smiled lightly. In that case, what are we waiting for? Let's go, Mr. Gentleman. He got up and fell into step with her, leaving the clearing behind them. Naruto approached the edge of the training grounds as darkness settled across the Hidden Leaf village. He had been walking alongside Kurenai in comfortable silence, and they were getting close to Kurenai's apartment. How did you find that waterfall in the first place? Kurenai asked him, out of the blue. Naruto grinned, rubbing the back of his neck. I found it during summer break. I was camping nearby and found it. Did you know that it's connected to the village's hot springs? She chuckled. I didn't know. That explains why it's always so warm. And I found a nice place to train nearby, so I've thought of the area as my personal hideout. A curious look crossed her face. I see. Naruto mentioning his training brought his thoughts back to his utter lack of progress, and it made him wonder about Kurenai's credentials, so to speak. You're a Nin, right, Kurenai-sensei? Yes, Naruto, I am, she replied in a relaxed tone. Naruto smiled, more to himself. Do you think he started, but trailed off? They just become friends, and he was already trying to ask her for stuff. Kurenai gave him an encouraging smile. If you have something to say, don't be afraid to say it. Naruto took a deep breath. Do you think you could teach me a few things? Kurenai's stride faltered, but she managed to recover quickly. Your sensei is Kakashi Haddock, right? Naruto nodded. He's a more experienced shinobi than I am, so he can teach you anything I could, and more. Naruto averted his gaze. You're right. Sorry for troubling you. A strained smile appeared on his face. The tense silence fell over the two after that. It persisted for the rest of their journey. Kurenai eventually stopped. And here we are. Thank you for accompanying me, Naruto. Naruto looked at the apartment complex and smiled widely at Kurenai. You're welcome. I'll see you soon. He stopped for a second, looking for the right words. And thanks. He turned around and ran home. Kurenai stood there, looking back at him for a bit before she sighed and entered her apartment complex. Naruto was elated, his joy giving him more energy. He wondered how he had managed to make friends with someone like Kurenai so easily, but he brushed off the negativity those kinds of thoughts could bring, excited that he had another person he could call friend. As he passed the village's main plaza, he slowed down. Even so, his smile could not be beat as he continued his trek back home. He looked around at the red light district of the Hidden Leaf village, where his apartment was located. Apparently, he was supposed to get an apartment in the market district, but he didn't believe that for a second. Because he had forgotten to clean himself, he stripped down once he got home and jumped into his cold shower, ignoring the freezing water all the while. After he finished, he dried himself off with a towel and headed to his bed. As he lay in his bed, with his black frog-shaped cap and pajamas, he began to think back and smiled as he came across his first new friend since his school days. During his time at the academy, Iruka had been one of the few to help him, and he saved his life from the traitorous Mizuki. He even acknowledged and accepted him. He had his team, but they weren't really his friends, even if he was willing to be friends with the both of them. Finally, he thought about the Hokage, who was like a grandfather to him. He had trusted him explicitly, but to no avail. The villagers still looked at him with fear and disdain. Some of them tried to bar him from shopping in their stores, and they just so happened to be the ones who were the victims of his pranks. Well, it sucked to be them, because they couldn't stop him from shopping wherever he damn well pleased. Fortunately, the Hokage didn't tolerate any of the villagers openly beating or sabotaging him. Now that he knew why, it caused him to look at his village and the Hokage's actions in a new light. The Hokage lied to him. He might have said it was for his protection, but knowing about the nine-tailed fox beforehand would have helped him considerably. At least he would know why everyone hated him. This caused his trust in the Hokage to take a hit, since if he lied about something so big, what else might he be hiding from him? Maybe he knew who his parents really were, or if he was the last member of a clan. Naruto was still willing to give the Hokage a chance, though, even if he didn't trust him as much as he did before. He felt he could trust Kurenai, even though he only met her that day. She was kind, gentle, and considerate towards him, and she knew that he was a Jinchuriki. He felt good when he was around her, a feeling he wanted to get used to. With a smile on his face, he fell asleep, ready to take on the world and show him he was worthy of their respect. New digs. The loud whining of his alarm clock woke Naruto up from a really nice dream. He put a hand over his eyes to protect himself from the sun's harsh glare that peeked through the curtains. He eventually got his hand to the alarm clock and turned it off. Appreciating the silence, he got out of bed, placing his bare feet on the cold floor. He placed his frog-shaped cap on the bed and walked to the bathroom. He went in front of the mirror and looked at his reflection with bleary eyes before splashing cold water on his face. He brushed his teeth, and once his mouth was minty fresh, he dried himself off and walked into his bedroom. He put on his signature tracksuit, putting on his pants first, before putting on his shirt and jacket soon after. While he could get other clothes, this tracksuit in particular was practical and orange, his favorite color. Not only that, it was both an attention grabber, and it was good when he wanted to stay hidden after finishing a prank. Unlike black or white, orange allowed him to blend in with the crowd. It helped that orange was a fairly popular color. Naruto pulled a loose floorboard up and reached into it so that he could see much money he had saved up. He considered using the money to buy weapons, but that wasn't necessary. His stock of weapons were still waiting to be used. Maybe in a few years, he'd get the chance to throw a kunai. He took out his frog-shaped wallet, filled to bursting with bills with the money he saved. There's only 160,000 rim, he thought. It should be enough. Hopefully, they get a higher paying mission soon, or else Naruto might have no choice but to use his savings. D ranks paid little in the first place, so he was grateful that he had some money. He placed his wallet inside his jacket and went to the kitchen, taking out a carton of fresh milk and a can of red bean soup. After drinking that carton of rotten milk last month, he made sure that he would never, ever buy or drink expired milk ever again. Shuddering at the thought, he drank the milk and poured the soup into a bowl, downing it quickly. Red bean soup was a decent breakfast meal and one of his favorite foods, other than ramen. It was easy to prepare and cheap too. In case he didn't have ramen in supply, red bean soup was a good replacement. Same went for a sandwich if he had the bread and meat. He mowed through his breakfast, rubbed his mouth with his sleeve, and set off for another day of teamwork exercises. Maybe he'd get to do a deer ank if he was lucky. Naruto, stomach full and spirits high, ran outside his apartment complex. While he was running to his team's meeting place, he thought about his new friend, Kurenai. He really wanted to see her again, and every time he thought about her, he remembered her kindness and her incredible beauty. He felt better about himself, knowing that he had a friend like her. He hoped he could make more friends just like her. He even ignored the glares he got from the villagers, too occupied with his happy thoughts to spare them a glance. He knew that they hated him because he had the nine-tailed fox stuck inside of him. But if he thought about it, all he could do was show them that he was Naruto Uzumaki, Hokage in the making, not the village's dirty secret or punching bag. With this thought in mind, he continued his run, his strides increasing in pace and his smile growing larger. He didn't feel the need to force it because the smile on his face was the real deal. When Naruto made it to the bridge, he saw his teammates were already there. Kakashi, however, was nowhere to be found. "Morning, Sakura, Sasuke," he said, trying not to shout and be a general nuisance. Actions, not words. "Morning," Sakura said. Sasuke nodded a greeting. Naruto smiled, glad that what he did worked out well. He began to play the waiting game. He thought of something to do while he waited. Finding a leaf, he tried to make it stick to his forehead after vaguely remembering the exercise from his academy days. Good thing he only ditched that class after Iruka demonstrated the exercise. While Naruto was busy with his chakra exercise, Sakura and Sasuke simply sat there. Sakura passed the time by staring at Sasuke, while Sasuke was still as a statue. "What are you doing?" Sakura asked. Naruto's concentration was broken, and his leaf fell from his forehead. "What does it look like?" "It's a chakra control exercise." Then he grabbed the leaf and started from scratch. Sakura's eyes twitched. "I know what it is. I just want to know why you're doing it." "To increase my control over my chakra," he said in a matter-of-fact tone. Sakura scoffed and turned away from him, returning to watching Sasuke. Naruto concentrated on his chakra, but the leaf fell over and over again. After nearly an hour of struggle, he had a breakthrough and was able to make it stick to his forehead. For close to an hour, Naruto managed to keep the technique going. But he grew impatient and began to think of ways to increase the difficulty of the exercise. He realized, however, if he let his mind wander, the exercise became harder. The easiest alternate exercise he could think of was to push the leaf back and forth to different locations on his body, only using his chakra. He channeled chakra directly below the leaf and slowly tried to turn off the chakra that was holding the leaf to him so the leaf would float down and attach itself to the new place he had chakra channeling. Unfortunately, once he let go of the leaf, it flew off and landed across the bridge. He grabbed another leaf and stared at it, trying to figure out how to complete the exercise. "I got it." If he could provide the push with excess chakra, timing it just right so the leaf would be pushed in the direction he wanted, then he could attach it to other places on his body. He got the leaf in position and channeled chakra to a spot just below the area and tried to increase the chakra running to the leaf without increasing the chakra flowing into the other area. The leaf just fell off his forehead and floated to the ground. He clenched his teeth in frustration. He grabbed the leaf and tried the exercise once again, but it was a bust. His frustration only grew with each successive failure. He finally reached a point where his irritation clashed with his control, to the point when he put the leaf on his head, it didn't attach at all. Sakura had watched Naruto try and failed to complete the exercise and shook her head. But Naruto didn't give in. He was going to finish this exercise, no matter what. Sasuke kept himself busy by meditating, closing his eyes to block out everything. He only opened his eyes once some time after Naruto came to the bridge. He wasn't surprised to see Sakura staring at him. It was fortunate that she liked him because he was dreamy or skilled and not because he was an Uchiha. He just wished she'd stop annoying him and get serious about being a ninja. He turned to watch the only person he considered decent on his team. Naruto wasn't as dumb as he acted, even though he frequently acted like a loser. He was unpredictable and frequently caught him by surprise, both in and out of combat. That unpredictability made him a wild card, so he never truly underestimated him. Unless he could fully harness that trait of his, he would never be a truly strong shinobi. Sasuke noticed that Naruto was unable to complete what looked like a variant of the leaf exercise, and it was only because he couldn't release a consistent amount of chakra, judging by how the leaf moved differently each time. At this rate, he was just going to embarrass himself, and that got old pretty quickly. Naruto. Use a consistent amount of chakra when you do the exercise. What was that, Sasuke? Naruto asked, too focused on his exercise to hear him. Idiot. You heard me. At least the loser looked like he was making some progress, but he wasn't going to go out of his way to help him. However, Sasuke and his teammates didn't notice Kakashi staring at them from a distance. But, as usual, Kakashi made himself known with all the subtlety of a firework. That put an end to Sasuke's perfect silence. Yo, Kakashi said, appearing next to Naruto. You're late. Sakura screeched. Kakashi cast a quick glance at Naruto since he hadn't bothered to yell at him, as usual, but that wasn't Sasuke's problem. Well, you see, there was this old lady that needed some help. Kakashi began. What a loser, Sasuke thought. Save your excuses for someone who cares. Kakashi's eyes smile, clearly amused. Well, since you want to be like that, I think we can skip a mission today and simply do teamwork exercises to make up for it. Meet me at the training grounds in 5 minutes. Kakashi disappeared in a swirl of leaves. He wouldn't admit it to Kakashi, but Sasuke had been inspired by Kakashi's speech about comrades and teamwork, and getting chewed out by the seasoned ninja made him consider what he said. Naruto and Sakura weren't beneath him, even if he was stronger than they were. The problem he had with this teamwork stuff was having to put up with this joke instead of learning new jutsu and getting stronger. Sakura didn't seem happy about having to do a D rank, but he didn't really care about what she thought. So long as she did her share and stopped bothering him, he'd be willing to work with her. After seeing that Kakashi had left as suddenly as he came, Naruto stopped doing the leaf exercise and looked around frantically. What happened? Where did Kakashi-sensei go? Sakura sighed. Just follow us. You can do that, right? Naruto looked at her and smiled. Sure. He followed Sakura and Sasuke, who had decided that haste didn't make waste. Since finishing these stupid teamwork exercises was the only way to progress, he'd do his part. He didn't have to like it, but if it was the only way he'd progress, then he'd do his best to put this behind him. It wasn't like he had a choice in the matter, anyway. Naruto walked slightly behind his teammates, taking note of how they were treated by the public while they walked to the training grounds. Sakura was greeted by a few people, and she responded kindly. Sasuke was looked at with some form of adulation by a few of the villagers, but glared at them after making eye contact. He breathed in sharply, aggravated at how Sasuke appeared to just brush off any acknowledgement he received. He also noticed some of the villagers glaring at him. He just ignored them, since they were a waste of his time. It was a good thing too, since he didn't want to overreact around his teammates. He knew that they only tolerated him because they were teammates, and while he held out hope that he would be friends with them, that hope had begun to diminish. When Team 7 entered the third training ground, they saw Kakashi perched on one of the training posts. Glad you could make it, Kakashi said with a wave. Kakashi-sensei. What are we going to do today? Naruto asked, his enthusiasm at probably learning something overcoming him. Didn't you hear me back at the bridge? We're doing teamwork exercises. He hopped off the training post and approached them. It was an exercise, so even though he wouldn't learn any new jutsu, Naruto focused his thoughts on completing it to the best of his ability. Maybe then he could actually be taught something. Kakashi clapped his hands together. Alright, guys, get in a triangle. Team 7 did so, forming a triangular formation. Kakashi pulled something out of his pocket, flicking his hand towards Naruto. Catch. Naruto's hand shot out and grasped a small white object flying through the air. Once he looked at the object in his hand, he frowned. Why did you give me an egg, Kakashi-sensei? It's part of a new teamwork exercise. Naruto cocked his head to the side, confused. How does an egg help our teamwork? Kakashi smiled with his eyes. Glad you asked. Naruto, you're going to take that egg and toss it to one of your teammates. Thing is, you can't let the egg break when throwing it to your teammate. This requires you to know your limits and your teammates' limits. I'll stop the exercise when you can throw the egg for half an hour without it breaking. If you can do that, we will move on to the next level. What are the other levels, sensei? Sakura asked, somewhat hesitant. We do this exercise with more dangerous objects, he said. Naruto swore Kakashi was enjoying the glares he received from Sakura and Sasuke. Go ahead and start, daylight's burning. Kakashi took out his orange novel and began to read. Team 7 briefly looked at each other before Naruto turned to face his teammates. He lobbed the egg to Sasuke, who caught it with his right hand. He tossed it to Sakura, who passed it right back to him. Sasuke passed it to Naruto, who lobbed it to Sakura, who threw it at Sasuke. He clutched the egg and smirked, only to frown when the egg burst in his hand. Sasuke looked at what was left of the egg and scowled. Damn it, Sasuke said. Naruto laughed at Sasuke's mishap. The image was just too funny. You idiot. Sakura shouted. Stop laughing at Sasuke. Naruto swallowed the anger from how Sakura immediately turned him, even though he knew he didn't do anything wrong. It's not my fault, Sasuke was trying to look cool. Sakura huffed in indignation. What would you know? Let's just try again, Sasuke muttered. Kakashi sighed and produced another egg, tossing it at Sasuke. Don't mess up. Sasuke cradled the egg before throwing it at Naruto. Naruto reached out and caught the egg. He tossed it to Sakura, who once again threw it to Sasuke, ignoring him. Sasuke shook his head and shot a glare at Sakura before tossing it back to her. Her cheeks were as pink as her hair, and once she caught the egg, she immediately threw it at Naruto. Once it was in his hand, he thrust it upwards, closing his fist. Sakura actually passed him the egg. The yolk seeped through his fingers, and he flushed. How could he be so dumb? Loser, Sasuke said, just loud enough for Naruto to hear. Naruto scowled. What was that? You heard me, Naruto. As soon as you get the egg, don't jump for joy. Just throw it back to either Sakura or me. He turned his glare to their other teammate. And Sakura, quit being annoying. Naruto growled under his breath. Yeah, I got it. Naruto. Don't you see that Sasuke's trying to help you? Sakura said, seeming to ignore that Sasuke had called her out. Not only did Sakura try to keep him out of the exercise, she just wasn't giving him a chance at all, always trying to side with Sasuke. The surprising thing was that Sasuke was trying to be the peacemaker, but seeing as how he insulted him, he didn't expect it to be permanent. I know, Naruto said in frustration. Let's just get this over with. Kakashi took out another egg and threw it at Sakura. Sakura threw the egg at Naruto with all her strength. What was that for? Naruto asked after the egg exploded against his jacket, staining it with yellow and white fluid. You made Sasuke angry at me. Sakura said. Naruto snorted. That wasn't my fault. You only threw the egg at me one time. She glared at him, a vein twitching in her forehead. He still thought it made her look really cute. If you don't get the egg, then you won't screw it up for us. That doesn't mean you can throw an egg at my jacket. Sakura marched over to him, but Kakashi stepped in her way. Sakura, you were wrong, he said. Apologize. Sakura blurted out an apology. Naruto simply nodded in acceptance. As long as it didn't happen again, he could move on. Let's just try again. Naruto, here's an egg. Don't try to take revenge on Sakura, Kakashi ordered. Naruto took the egg and was able to perform the exercise properly. In fact, each member of Team 7 was able to throw the egg to the next person without any hiccups. Sakura even threw the egg at Naruto every now and then. While there were mishaps, Team 7 managed to stick to their guns and keep the egg from breaking for well over an hour. Finally, we're done. Sakura said, pumping her fist in the air. Kakashi nodded. It seems that when push comes to shove, you can do the exercise properly. Tomorrow, we'll see if you can finish the next level of this exercise. See you then. Kakashi waved and disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto smiled brightly after he finished the exercise. He wasn't lucky enough to get a D rank, but still, they'd actually completed a teamwork exercise. Inspired by this success, Naruto decided to visit the library and get something good. He ran from the training ground quickly, leaving Sasuke and Sakura behind. He ran home so that he could head to the library without the stench of egg lingering around him. He got home and washed his hands quickly, scrubbing out the egg stains. Once he did so, he took off his jacket and replaced his black shirt with a white one that had an orange spiral on it. He placed his wallet in his pocket and wrapped his forehead protector around his neck, then left his apartment and raced to the library. There had to be something that he could use to make him stronger. Just before he could get to the library, he bumped into a familiar person and fell on his back. Naruto? Naruto got up and dusted himself off. Oh, Kurenai-sensei. Naruto put his hand behind his head. I was in a rush to get to the library, so I wasn't focusing. Sorry for bumping into you. Kurenai gave him a small smile. Apology accepted. Why would you want to go to the library? Because, Naruto said, mouth pulled into a frown. Kakashi-sensei isn't teaching us new jutsu. He only does teamwork exercises. Learning to work with your team is important, Kurenai said. It can make a real difference on missions. Although, I can tell how anxious you are to improve. I'd recommend being patient. Naruto nodded. That sounded reasonable, though his patience was tested every single day. I don't want to fall behind. That's why I want to go to the library and learn some new jutsu. At least you're showing initiative. She placed a finger on her chin, eyes clouded due to thought. Well, Naruto, how about this? I'll get you a jutsu scroll, but first you have to accompany me. Sounds good? Naruto nodded, a bright smile on his face. Thanks, Kurenai-sensei. Naruto followed his new friend, but he walked slightly behind for a bit so that he could make a shadow clone. He had the clone transform, ordering it to go to the library and look for information without getting caught. Once it left, he returned to his place at Kurenai's side. Where are we going, Kurenai-sensei? Naruto asked. They had been walking to a more affluent area of the Hidden Leaf Village, which made Naruto nervous. With his limited budget, he was unable to buy things from the shops here without putting a big dent in his savings. I know a place that would be perfect for you, Kurenai replied. The shop owner is an old friend of mine. Are you sure he'd want me in his shop? Naruto asked softly. He would, Kurenai said. If he doesn't, then we'll just have to find another place to shop. Naruto beamed, happy at how Kurenai was willing to stand by him. Okay. Kurenai suddenly scowled. He didn't say anything wrong, did he? No, that wasn't right. That unnerving anger he felt yesterday had come back, but it wasn't directed at him. Are you okay? Naruto asked. I'm fine, Naruto. Kurenai breathed in, and that sinking feeling of dread disappeared. She stretched out her hand to him. Let me show you a faster way to get to your destination. Naruto took her hand after calming down. Immediately after he did, they disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Naruto was both shocked and overjoyed after experiencing the rush of the body flicker, finding himself in front of a large shop. The name of the shop, Dragon's Claw, was painted above the shop's windows in bright gold characters. On display were different weapons and armor of sorts. Something about this shop was familiar to him, but he couldn't be certain. What are you waiting for, Naruto? Kurenai asked, her voice laced with a combination of concern and exasperation. Are you sure that the shop owner won't kick me out? Naruto asked. He didn't want to be humiliated in front of Kurenai. Kurenai bent to her knees and looked at Naruto. If he does, I will leave right alongside you. Okay? Her eyes reflected the warmth in her voice. She went inside, beckoning him to follow. Naruto hesitated at first, but steeled his resolve and followed Kurenai inside, confident that his new friend would support him. Once he entered the shop, he was nearly overwhelmed at the sheer amount of stock sitting on the shelves. The store was filled to the brim with a diverse range of weaponry, ranging from short swords to the naginata. Every weapon looked awesome, which would make choosing one difficult for him. He stopped looking around when a tall muscular man with black hair and brown eyes left the storage room. His booming voice could be heard from across the shop. Ah, Kurenai. What brings you here today? The amount of weapons I sold you should have been more than enough for your team. He walked over to Kurenai and Naruto, smiling widely. He was dressed in a gold short-sleeved shirt and black trousers. Kurenai returned the man's smile with one of hers, placing Naruto in front of her. I just wanted to show my new friend your shop. He has a shopping problem, if you could call it that. Takeshi stared at Naruto intently, taking in his figure. His stare became sharper. Naruto took a step back from Takeshi, but he couldn't back down. He pranked his store, so he'd own it, and he showed his spirit by making eye contact with the large shop owner. Neither one of them gave an inch. Then suddenly, Naruto and Takeshi broke out into grins as Takeshi laughed out loud. Naruto Uzumaki, the Hidden Leaf Village's #1 prankster. You're the only person who managed to prank my store. Naruto's usual confidence returned in spades. I knew that the sign looked familiar. Takeshi held out his hand, and Naruto took it, exchanging a firm handshake. Kurenai stared at Naruto and Takeshi, a smile pulling at her lips. I didn't know you two were acquainted. He got me with one of his pranks a while back, Takeshi said. Since you're here, that must mean you want something. How can I help you? Naruto blinked in surprise. Even after he pranked Takeshi, he still wanted to help him out? I wanted to show Naruto a place where he could buy weapons and clothing at a good price, Kurenai said, since Naruto was too busy processing something that shouldn't have been happening. Takeshi looked down at Naruto with surprise before his face broke into a grin. In that case, you're always welcome to shop here, Naruto. Since it's the first time you've come here, I'll even throw in a discount. How does that sound? Naruto stared at Takeshi with white eyes before giving him a smile so big it threatened to split his face. That looks like a yes, Takeshi said, a grin never wavering. I'll show you our clothing section first. Do you know your clothing size? I don't know, I never really looked, he replied. If I wanted to buy a shirt, I would just take it. Even if it was a bit big, it didn't matter. Kurenai looked at Naruto. Take off your shirt. What? Naruto asked. I want to see your shirt size, Kurenai explained. Then I can get something good for you, alright? Takeshi crossed his arms. He looks small to me. There's no harm in making sure, is there? Kurenai said. It was a strange request, but it seemed like Kurenai just wanted to help him out. So he took off his white shirt, revealing his chest. While he was slightly muscular, his torso wasn't as defined as he wanted it to be. Kakashi did make Team 7 go through drills before doing the teamwork stuff, but today was an off day to let their bodies rest. Naruto, what do you regularly eat? Kurenai asked, slowly. I eat ramen almost all the time, Naruto said. The only time I don't is if I don't have any. Then I'll eat red bean soup or a sandwich. They're easy to prepare and cheap too. Kurenai looked at Naruto blankly. It seems that you're not getting the proper nutrition. While your body isn't as bad as it could be considering your diet, you need to eat other food besides ramen and red bean soup. And sandwiches aren't enough. Naruto frowned in response. Kurenai looked at Naruto's shirt, handing it back to him once she saw the shirt size tag. Don't worry about that, Naruto. For now, let's get you some new clothes. Kurenai walked to the clothing section, but Naruto didn't follow. What's wrong with my tracksuit? Naruto asked, looking straight at Kurenai. Don't you want some variety for your wardrobe? Kurenai asked. While your choice of clothing is interesting, what would happen if they became dirty or got destroyed in battle? Naruto's sour mood evaporated. Kurenai wasn't making fun of his love of orange or his tracksuit. I get it. I can wear any new clothes I want, but I can still wear my tracksuit in case I need it. And considering that he needed to clean his jacket, Kurenai's argument made a lot more sense now that he thought about it. Exactly, Kurenai said. I have a red version of this dress in case of emergencies. Knowing I have another set of clothing allows me to focus on more important things. Naruto grinned. So what are we waiting for? Kurenai smiled. Stay here. I know just what to get you. Naruto watched as Kurenai moved fluidly through the aisles. She returned with a set of clothing, handing them to him. Try this on. I think you'll like them quite a bit, she said, with more enthusiasm than he expected from her. Naruto smiled appreciatively and took off to the changing rooms. Once he got out, he was wearing the clothes Kurenai gave him, a dull gray shirt with an orange spiral in the center and dull gray pants with bright orange stripes along the sides. His forehead protector was still wrapped around his neck. So what do you think? Naruto asked expectantly. Kurenai smiled in approval, while Takeshi gave Naruto a once-over. It needs something to seal the deal, he mused. Takeshi went to take a bright orange sash from the bargain bin, handing it to Naruto. Naruto immediately tied the sash to his waist, and when he checked himself out with the mirror nearby, he smiled. He looked good. It looked like Kurenai, and Takeshi was satisfied too. I see the sash will act as a distraction for the enemy, won't it? Kurenai asked. Like my sleeve does for me. Takeshi nodded. That's why I got it. Something on one of the shelves caught Naruto's attention. It was a burnt orange sweater with a collar that looked like the one on Sasuke's shirt. Although with the sweater, the collar didn't funnel out as much and appeared to have a hood tucked inside. It instead had 6 diagonally placed strings, 3 on each side of the center, with 2 strings hanging loosely from the collar's center. Naruto took the sweater and wore it over his shirt, which combined really well with his new pants. Are you sure you want that, Naruto? Kurenai asked. Naruto gave her a thumbs up in response. He went back to the changing rooms to change back to his previous clothing then returned to Takeshi, who had taken his spot next to the sales counter. The sweater costs 10,000 rim, the shirt and pants are 8,000 rim, and the standard weapons set. What weapons are set? Naruto asked. This one, Kurenai answered. She was holding out a weapons holster filled with a set of kunai, shuriken, explosive tags, and ninja wire. The standard weapons set is 20,000 rim, so your total comes out to 38,000 rim, Takeshi explained, slipping into sales mode. For an added fee of 7,000 rim, I'll give you 3 copies of each set of clothing and have them delivered to your apartment, free of charge. This whole deal was a massive steal. Naruto was ecstatic to know he didn't have to pay so much money. Pulling out his wallet, he took out 45,000 rim, which made Kurenai look at Naruto's wallet as if it were alive, like a frog that devoured money. You have that much money, and you worry about food or a lack of clothing? Naruto nodded. It doesn't feel like a lot of money, and I always pay a lot. Kurenai scowled once again, which made Naruto shudder. When they made eye contact, she loosened her fist. I apologize, Naruto, Kurenai said. I'm just surprised. You shouldn't be. This shop is incredible. I'm definitely coming here again. Naruto beamed brightly, bringing a warm smile to Kurenai's face. I'll be glad to have you shop here, Naruto, Takeshi said, handing Naruto a bag filled with his purchases. Let me get your details, and I'll have your extra clothing delivered within 3 days. Naruto did so. After he did, he looked outside the store, noticing that the sun was starting to hang low in the sky. Thank you, Takeshi. He turned to his new friend. Kurenai-sensei, please let me walk you home. It's the least I can do after what you did for me today. Takeshi grinned and leaned down, whispering to Naruto. I never knew you were such a gentleman, Naruto. You may have to wait until you're older if you want to date Kurenai, though. Naruto blushed in a virulent shade of crimson. Date? She's only my friend. He walked outside the shop, where Kurenai was waiting for him. Naruto. Kurenai stopped him in his tracks. She then smiled suggestively. Didn't you say you wanted to take me somewhere? You are a gentleman, after all. Naruto flushed, but he managed to gain control over himself, walking with Kurenai to her apartment. The walk to Kurenai's apartment was spent in companionable silence. When they were outside the complex, Naruto turned to Kurenai and smiled again. Thanks again for helping me, Kurenai-sensei. Kurenai returned Naruto's smile with one of her own. It was my pleasure, Naruto. It's a good thing Takeshi gave you a discount too. That never happens. Naruto blinked slowly, grasping the sides of his head. What was that? I can remember exactly what my clone did earlier. What kind of clone were you using? The shadow clone jutsu, Naruto said. Impressive, especially for a genin. The shadow clone's special ability lets its user gain the memories of a clone once it dispels. Naruto scratched his head. What does dispel mean? When something is forced to disappear, it dispels. Naruto beamed at Kurenai. Really? That's so cool. Thanks for telling me. Kurenai smiled. It made her red eyes shine. I am a sensei, after all. It's my job to know these things. She was a sensei, wasn't she? And she was willing to help him too. Well, I have to go now. Bye. See you soon, she replied. Naruto ran off, leaving Kurenai with a glowing expression on his face. His smile couldn't be beat as dashed home with his new clothes in hand. While he was irritated that he couldn't find anything useful in the library to take home and read, he wasn't as worried about it as he might have been. He had new clothes, new weapons, and he could go to the Dragon's Claw whenever he wanted to. He even finished a teamwork exercise. Naruto placed his clothes in the closet once he made it to his apartment, changing into his sleepwear and plopping on the bed. Before he fell asleep, he thought about Kurenai. Although he had only known her for 2 days, he only had a great time with her. If the warm feeling he got in his chest whenever he thought about her came from being friends, he could only hope that this new friendship could continue. A new beginning. Naruto woke up and did his daily routine. He went to his wardrobe and decided to put on his dark gray shirt and pants, wanting to break his new clothing in. He tied his orange sash around his waist and went to the kitchen. He opened the kitchen cabinets and found that he had nothing. He didn't have anything to eat yesterday other than breakfast. Sighing deeply, Naruto decided to focus on himself before he went to his team. After all, Kakashi would be late, so he wouldn't be missing out on anything. Naruto grabbed his wallet and put his dirty clothing in the bag he got from Takeshi. Afterwards, he put on his sandals and walked out, his three-step plan set and ready to put in motion. As he walked through the red light district, he smiled at the women who chose to wave at him. It didn't matter if they were women who gave men a good time, he was happy that someone would acknowledge him. Those women had been doing this for a while, and he doubted they would ever stop. However, that affection they felt for him felt good, real or fake, and he didn't want it to end. He couldn't explain his feelings about those women. In a way, it felt similar to what he felt about Kurenai. Was it because of their age? Was it because they showed him affection in their own ways? One thing was for sure, he didn't feel that way when he was around Sakura. With Sakura, he thought she was cute and smart, which was what attracted him at first. Kurenai was all that and far more. She made him feel respected and cared for, and she had a maturity that Sakura just wasn't capable of matching. More than once, he thought that the reason behind his crush on Sakura was an unusual way to beat Sasuke, who was fully capable of having Sakura as his girlfriend if he was willing to return her feelings. However, he found out that wasn't the case. He just liked her. In the past 2 days, the majority of his thoughts revolved around Kurenai, and Sakura had almost become an afterthought. Did it mean that he liked Kurenai more than Sakura? He'd known Sakura for a lot longer, but he realized Sakura hadn't ever been nice to him when she wasn't forced to. Kurenai didn't need to be forced to do anything. Naruto shook his head, banishing those kinds of thoughts for the moment. They wouldn't get him anywhere. A few minutes later, Naruto reached the market district. Creating 2 shadow clones, he had them transform and gave them the money they needed. The clones split up to fulfill their objectives. One would go to the supermarket, while the other would take his dirty clothing to the laundromat. Step 1, complete. Naruto was walking towards Ichiraku Ramen and noticed something interesting. Because of his new clothing, which had substantially less orange, he wasn't recognized by some of the villagers. 1 or 2 of them even waved at him, but stopped abruptly once they realized they were waving at the demon boy. Naruto continued to march on, undeterred by the growing sadness emerging from within. He shook off the feeling once he found himself in front of his favorite restaurant. While he could eat at other restaurants, he never considered eating anywhere else. He felt like it was a betrayal to do so. 1 miso ramen, and keep them coming, old man, Naruto said. Sure thing Naruto, is that you? Tucci asked. Naruto grinned. Yeah. Like my new clothes? Tucci pondered that question as he began to work on Naruto's order. It's different, but in a good way. What happened to that tracksuit of yours? Took it to the laundry, Naruto explained. I can't be a ninja with filthy clothing, after all. And I found this new shop where I bought the clothes I'm wearing at a bargain. That's great, Naruto. I'm glad things are working out for you. Tucci handed Naruto a bowl of ramen. Here you go, 1 miso ramen. Naruto began to dig in. Enjoying the flavor of the broth and the noodles like he always did, he quickly finished the bowl. However, there was something bugging him. Tucci, do you know what nutrition is? Naruto asked. It's something that lets you know how healthy your food is. The healthier the food, the better it is for your body, and this helps you grow more muscle, increase your fitness, and so on. Why do you ask? Is there a way to make this ramen more nutritious? Naruto considered what was considered healthy, namely vegetables. He grimaced at the thought. Without taking out the flavor, he added. I want to be a stronger ninja, and a healthy ninja is a strong ninja, right? Tucci nodded. Don't worry. If it's the nutrition you want, I know a few tricks to help you out. Tucci smiled. I'll whip something up for you by tomorrow. Naruto smiled. Thanks. Tucci handed him another bowl. Not a problem, Naruto. Anything for my favorite customer. After finishing another 6 bowls of ramen, Naruto paid for his breakfast and walked to the bridge. On the way there, he passed the Hokage's administration complex. He had an urge to tell the old Hokage what he'd been up to for the past 2 days, but he didn't feel like doing so, not today at least. The Hokage helped him when it came to managing money or living on his own, and he was always available when it came to general advice, but as soon as he asked about his mom, dad or even his clan, the old man stopped talking. He still wanted to trust that the Hokage had a good reason for doing so, but he wasn't willing to waste his time and feel the pang of disappointment yet again. Besides, he couldn't totally rely on the Hokage anymore. Now that he was a ninja, he didn't get a weekly stipend given to civilian orphans. Good thing too, because Naruto realized that he would have been given money yesterday, so it was fortunate he didn't rely on the stipend any longer. He would have to pull his own weight and start working hard. That meant giving up his pranks. They made him feel better, they tested his skills, and they let him target someone who was particularly rude or annoying to get some revenge, but they weren't how a good ninja was supposed to act. There would be other ways to raise his skill level. Naruto thought about Kakashi, and if Kakashi wasn't going to help him, he would have to find another way to become stronger. He forgot to get that ninja scroll from Kurenai, so maybe he'd try and find her later on. When Naruto reached the bridge, he saw his teammates doing their usual thing. Sakura was staring dreamily at Sasuke, and Sasuke ignored her, thinking about whatever he thought about. Naruto was about to greet his teammates, but stopped when he remembered his chakra control exercise. He took a leaf and sat on the opposite side of the bridge. He practiced for nearly an hour and saw that he was getting much better at the exercise. The first time he tried to move the leaf, it would stick for half a second before it burst or slipped from his head. The more times he did it, the longer the leaf stuck, though how long it remained attached only increased by 1 or 2 seconds each time. In spite of his improvement, seeing the leaf fall for the 10th or 15th time was really getting to him. He wasn't close to where he wanted to be, and if he didn't focus with all his strength, his control would start to slip. He sighed and put the leaf away, deciding to try the exercise again when he was calm. He looked up and noticed that his teammates didn't even bother to greet him, which caused him to seethe in anger. Didn't they care enough about him to notice his presence? Yeah, he was usually much louder, but he shouldn't have to shout to be noticed. The Hokage always talked about how teams would be like a second family, which was why he was so happy about his team at first. He still had a crush on Sakura, and he would have been happy having her on any team with him, so he could show her how awesome he was, or at least be her friend. As for Sasuke, his opinion of him was mixed. He felt close to Sasuke because he knew what it felt like to be alone, but Sasuke didn't acknowledge their rivalry and was so distant and cold towards everyone else. Didn't he care about anything at all? Kakashi was probably the worst. For some reason, Kakashi felt like an old friend. Because of this, he felt happy to have him as a sensei. However, he was just setting himself up for yet another disappointment. He refused to teach them anything until they were ready, no matter how much he begged. He was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Sasuke had a whole clan library he could use to gain knowledge and power. Sakura's parents were ninja, and even without their help, she could go to the public library. Even if he could enter the library through other means, he wouldn't know where to start. He was contemplating going to the Hokage again for some assistance, but he knew someone else who could help him, Iruka. Iruka knew his flaws as a shinobi and could point him in the right direction, so he'd visit him after practice. Naruto? Naruto raised his head to look at his teammates and noticed that both of them were staring at him with strange looks on their faces. He smiled at them, happy they had finally acknowledged him. "Hi, Sakura, Sasuke." Sasuke gave him a nod. "Naruto." Sakura didn't return his greeting, but that was fine. She was busy staring at him and his clothes. He saw a smile slowly crawl onto her face, then it was stamped out before it could fully form, twisting into a violent scowl. "You think that wearing nice clothes will make me interested in you?" Naruto's jaw dropped. He saw Sasuke take a step back, eyes wide from surprise. "Well, you might think you look cool, but no matter what you do, Sasuke will always be better than you. Right, Sasuke?" Sasuke pulled his hand over his face. He glared at Sakura. "Sakura, just shut up." Then Sasuke turned away, leaving Sakura with her mouth agape. Her hands balled into fists. "See what you did, Naruto? And Sasuke hates me, and it's all your fault." What in the world was going on? Did Sakura really hate him so much? Naruto jumped to his feet. "I didn't buy these clothes just to impress you, I bought them because you ruined my tracksuit." Sakura snorted. "Well, I wouldn't be mad. You should be thanking me for getting rid of that thing you call clothing." He grit his teeth, feeling them grind against one another. This couldn't be happening, it just couldn't be. One thing was clear, though, he needed a break. So he decided to walk away from the bridge. "Naruto, where do you think you're going?" "I need to cool off. I'll be back sooner or later." Naruto strained out, trying his hardest to not shake violently in anger. "Naruto," Sasuke said. Naruto stopped walking. "You have to come back. If you don't, then we can't do anything today. We need you here." Figures. Just when he was going to leave, only then did Sasuke try to acknowledge him. Naruto just raised his hand in the air without letting Sasuke see his face. He let it fall to his side and walked into the nearby forest. A few minutes later, Naruto returned with a lighter expression on his face. Sasuke smirked. Glad you listened. The sooner we finish these stupid exercises, the sooner we can learn some jutsu. Naruto smiled in response. Sakura huffed indignantly. Yeah. Even if you're a loudmouth, we still need you on our team. But that doesn't mean I like you, got it? Naruto's face contorted into a scowl, but he took a deep breath and calmed himself down. He had to do those exercises, and no amount of anger was going to prevent him from doing what was right. Naruto stumbled through the forest, trampling over roots and fallen branches. All of his past interactions with Sakura were playing in his mind in a distorted loop, and he didn't know why he bothered pursuing her. She didn't care about him at all, and she never gave him a chance. Even Sasuke was better than she was, although the only reason why he cared was because they were on the same team and they had to do those stupid teamwork exercises. Sasuke would defend him then, but otherwise, he wouldn't give anyone the time of day. They were supposed to be a team, friends, even a family, but now Naruto wasn't sure. Kakashi barely did anything to stop Sakura. Only yesterday did Kakashi, for the first time, do anything to stop Sakura's garbage. He continued to walk through the forest, feeling his anger ebb away, but after an hour or so, he felt a phantom pain erupt from the back of his head and around his back. A flood of memories entered his brain, showing him exactly what happened to his clone. Throw the shuriken properly, loser, Sasuke said. His fingers were bleeding from a shallow cut. Naruto scowled. Don't call me a loser, asshole. Don't swear at Sasuke. Sakura shouted. Sasuke glared at Sakura. Stay out of this. After some physical drills, Kakashi had given them the same exercise they did yesterday, using a shuriken instead of an egg. They had to make sure they caught it without touching the sharp edges, which Sasuke hadn't done, leading to the fight. Sakura had recoiled in shock from Sasuke's outburst. But, Sasuke. I don't need your help, got it? Yeah, Sakura, mind your own business, Naruto said. Sakura cracked her knuckles. What did you say? She stomped forward, clearly about to hit him, but Kakashi held her back. Sakura, that's enough. Take a deep breath and calm down. We don't fight with our teammates. Kakashi's hold was strong enough to keep Sakura from doing anything other than struggle in his grip. Her green eyes blazed with fury, slowly starting to water up. Seeing Sakura about to cry only made his rage burn even harder. She was crying just because Kakashi was actually doing his job? She'd just laugh at him if he cried. And Sasuke was just watching with his cold glare. Typical. Call me a loser again, and you'll regret it, Naruto said. What happened next happened very quickly. Sasuke called him a loser, Naruto ran at him, then Sasuke dodged his punch and threw him to the hard ground. Once a loser, always a loser. Naruto's eyes turned to ice. Kakashi was willing to step in only when everything was about to fall apart, but it wouldn't have gotten to this point if he did his job in the first place. If Kakashi wasn't willing to be a good teacher, then he'd go and find another team. Kurenai was a sensei, so maybe he could join Team 8. He'd join any other team if it meant getting away from Team 7. He had enough of Kakashi. Sasuke only cared until something pissed him off, and the less said about Sakura, the better. Normally he would ignore it and try again, but after experiencing real friendship from Kurenai, he felt like there was no real point in being friends with people who didn't want anything to do with him in the first place. Hey, you there. Naruto was shaken out of his reverie by that commanding voice, finding himself in an unfamiliar training ground. We're busy using this training ground. I need you to leave so you won't get hurt. However, he was familiar with the genin. He wasn't really in the mood to say hello, but instead, he stared at the man who must have been their genin sensei. He had spiky black hair with a beard that covered his entire jaw. He was wearing the hidden leaf uniform consisting of a green sleeveless flak jacket with a blue long-sleeved shirt and matching pants. The only thing that stood out was his sash that had the kanji for fire on it. He looked familiar for some reason. The trio of genin looked at Naruto in barely disguised shock, but he couldn't care less about their opinions right now. Didn't you hear me? The genin asked. Yeah, I did, Naruto said. And I have a name, it's Naruto Uzumaki. If you know the Hokage, then you should know exactly who I am. The genin blinked before smiling slightly. Yeah, I know you. The name's Asuma Saratobi. Asuma took a drag from his cigarette and let out a puff of black smoke. A small smile came across Naruto's face, which confirmed his suspicion. Nice to meet you. Asuma nodded in response, and Naruto saw Team 10 stare incredulously at their exchange. At least, Ino did. Chunjai just continued to eat his bag of chips, clearly over his surprise, but Shikamaru continued to look right at him. Shouldn't you be with your team, Naruto? Asuma asked. Naruto frowned, feeling tears threaten to break from his eyes. He shook his head and focused on the meeting he'd have with Iruka or meeting Kurenai again. He couldn't afford to cry in front of people who didn't care. Our sensei let us go, Naruto said. He let himself go, but they didn't need to know that. He cleared his throat. His voice was getting too raspy. Asuma nodded. I see. Since you're here, is there anything you need? Naruto kept this new, detached mask up. It gave him focus and let him leave his emotions behind. Can I train with you and your team? Sorry, but you can't, he said. Naruto's brow furrowed. It was worth a shot, but he didn't expect much in the first place. We're a team of 4, so adding more genin would only disrupt our dynamic. And I don't think it'd be fair to Kakashi if I was training his genin behind his back. Naruto bit back the retort. It was too bitter, too filled with resentment to say out loud. Ino suddenly smiled. Let Naruto join us, Asuma-sensei. Then I can join Team 7 and be with. No, Ino, Asuma said. You're staying with us. Asuma took another drag of his cigarette. Naruto, you can watch us train if you want, but you can't stay for long. I think a guy like you has some plans. Naruto took another look at Team 10. Ino was pouting, Chunjai was still mowing through his bag of chips, and Shikamaru was still watching him. His eyes had never strayed this whole time. When they made eye contact, Shikamaru didn't look away. Instead, he made some weird hand signals that caught Asuma's attention. Asuma raised an eyebrow, but he gave Shikamaru a nod. We'll be taking a break, Asuma said. Ino, Chunjai, let's get going. I need to talk to your parents about something important. Is Shikamaru going to come with us? Chunjai asked. He can catch up. Asuma smirked. It'll do him some good to get a bit of exercise. Asuma grabbed his genin and took them away in a tornado of leaves. Naruto stared at where Asuma left. If this was Shikamaru's way of getting some sleep, then good for him. It was time for him to leave. Naruto, wait, Shikamaru said. What is it? He asked. He honestly had enough. He just wanted to go to Iruka, then go home and sleep so that he didn't have to deal with anyone. Everything okay? Naruto shrugged. Yeah, I'm fine. Are you sure about that? He took a deep breath, then closed his eyes and smiled. See? I'm doing great. When he opened his eyes, Shikamaru was standing right in his face, hands in his pockets. Did Kakashi really let you guys go? Yeah, he did, Naruto said, hoping he'd get the hint. Shikamaru frowned. Don't lie, Naruto. You're not good at it. The mask he'd tried to keep was falling apart before his eyes. He couldn't break, not here. What do you care about? Shouldn't you be taking a nap somewhere? Maybe, but it's almost noon, and if I take a nap now, then I'll miss lunch. He quickly looked up at the sun. It was high in the sky, practically at its peak. He was practically at rock bottom. Then why didn't you leave with your team? I wanted to talk to you. Naruto clicked his tongue. You coulda fooled me. Shikamaru took his hands out of his pockets. Well, I'm here now, aren't I? Why do you think Asuma left when we were in the middle of training? Naruto thought about it. Asuma didn't have any reason to leave his team's training ground, but he did after Shikamaru made those gestures. It doesn't matter. It's none of your business why I left my team. A slight smirk appeared on his face. So you did leave your team? What? No. We were done with training. Shikamaru shook his head. Naruto. All the emotions he'd been bottling up were begging to escape, but he held on for dear life. Yet Shikamaru continued to stare, eyes boring into him until he had no choice but to let go. I got mad at my team, and I ran away, all right. Is that what you want to hear? He nodded. Good, you're still you. I thought I was dealing with Sasuke. I'm nothing like Sasuke. He doesn't care about anything but himself. If he did, he'd see how many people cared about him. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow. I know you aren't popular, but you never let that stop you before, so why start now? You don't seem like the jealous type. Naruto snorted. Well, what do you know? Enough to know I don't know a damn thing, he said, without a hint of shame. So enlighten me, Naruto. If you weren't jealous of Sasuke, then what made you angry enough to stop training? Try as he might, Shikamaru was wearing him down. He didn't flinch when Naruto shouted at him, and it didn't seem like he was just trying to figure out a puzzle. "I still don't know why you care," Naruto said. "I thought wasting energy was too much of a drag." Shikamaru grunted. "It is a drag, but it isn't. We might not have hung out in a long time, but we're still comrades." Naruto flinched as it brought up a memory that should have been pleasant and even triumphant, but it seemed more and more like a lie with every passing day. "Those who abandon the mission are scum, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than scum," Naruto quotes. "Who said that?" Shikamaru asked. Naruto looked at the grass on the ground. "Kakashi-sensei." He smiled. "It's a great quote. And if Kakashi said something like that, then he can't be a bad teacher." Naruto's eyes were cold. Tired. "Too bad he doesn't teach me anything. He wants us to be a good team before we learn any jutsu. What's the problem with that? Asuma makes us run teamwork drills." He scowled. "My teammates hate me. Sakura's never been nice to me, and every time I think Sasuke might be okay, he goes and ruins it by being a bastard. I even left a clone with them, and they didn't notice that it was different until it dispelled." Shikamaru raised his hand. "Wait, I thought you couldn't do the clone jutsu." Naruto sighed and formed a shadow clone. "Go ahead, touch it." Shikamaru held out his fist and did a fist bump with Naruto's clone. It dispelled soon after. "Damn, you made a real flesh and blood clone," Shikamaru said. "My dad always said it was too much for a genin." Naruto rubbed the back of his neck. He'd worked hard to make only one clone instead of a dozen, and it was only by doing the leaf exercise that he was able to get a grip on his chakra control. "You see? If I can learn the shadow clone jutsu, then I know I can learn other jutsu. But the problem is that I don't even know where to start." Instead of laughing at him or complaining that he was only going to embarrass himself, Shikamaru only stared at him with his beady black eyes. "Have you tried going to the library? Not the public one, the archive library." "No, but it's not like I'll be welcome there." Shikamaru sighed. "I don't know why you'd think that, but if it's really bothering you, I can get you some books from home." Naruto breathed. "You'd really do that?" He shrugged. "Why not? What's in it for you?" "Nothing, really. It isn't like I'll miss those books." Naruto shut his eyes. He couldn't believe that this was happening, that someone as lazy as Shikamaru was capable of showing this type of kindness. He opened his eyes. "You're really sure about this?" Shikamaru clenched his fists, brow furrowing. A few moments later, he looked him in the eye, and in that moment, Naruto knew that he was dead serious. "I'm sure." Naruto smiled. It was a tentative one and a bit shaky, but it was real. Because now, he knew Shikamaru was on his side. "Thanks, Shikamaru." He smiled as well. "It's no problem. My dad always tells me to do what's right, and seeing you like this, I know that helping you out is the right thing to do." He held out his hand. "So, what do you say? Friends?" Naruto took Shikamaru's hand and shook it. "Friends." Thanks for watching my video. Leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. If you want the next part of this story, let me know in the comment box. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.